Welcome to The Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. As I'm sure you are all aware, leftist politicians in the United States, citing the pandemic, have imposed stricter bans in many parts of the country, creating controversy among the American people. In Pennsylvania, during Thanksgiving, if you want to see your friends, everyone will have to wear a mask, even in the house. This kind of excessive law is very new in America. Americans have always limited the jurisdiction of the government, but now leftist politicians are not only using the pandemic as an excuse to expand the government's authority, but they have even begun spreading government jurisdiction into people's homes. One Pennsylvania resident said, "No one can tell me what to do in my own home. They don't pay my bills. They don't get to tell me what to do in my home." In reality, these government mandates on indoor gatherings carry the weight of law, but cannot actually be enforced. So in the United States, rules like these have become dependent on voluntary compliance. According to Johns Hopkins University Tracking Report, there have been an average of 172,000 new infections per day across the United States in the past week. Based on past experience, most Americans will voluntarily follow pandemic guidelines and protocols to slow down the speed of the disease. However, if the measure becomes too strict, there's bound to be controversy. After all, this is a society in which people are willing to choose how to protect themselves rather than rely on the government to direct their actions, which is the practice of a communist dictatorship. Many experts have also warned that these measures to lock down the city are actually not very effective in slowing down the spread of the pandemic. What it does do is put more pressure on the people and destroy the social economy. So the loss outweighs the gain. But now some leftist politicians in the United States are not listening to the scientific community and are bent on dealing with the pandemic through big government regulation. In Utah, Vermont, parts of Pennsylvania, and Dane County, Wisconsin, social gatherings are completely banned. In New York State, indoor gatherings are limited to 10 people. In Kentucky, if 2 families gather, the total number of people may not exceed 8. And in Oregon, social gatherings may not exceed 6 people. If all of this is still somewhat tolerable, let's list a few more areas that are also under the jurisdiction of Democratic Party leaders with even stricter measures. New Mexico's Democratic Governor, Grissom, has declared that New Mexico is going to restructure by imposing a statewide lockdown, which is set to last for an initial 2-week period beginning this past Monday, November 23rd. Residents will be instructed to stay at home except for the only most essential trips. Washington Governor Jay Inslee, who last week enacted a month-long ban requiring restaurants, gyms, and other indoor service providers to limit the number of people indoors to 25% of the original capacity, which will have a significant impact on their businesses. Starting from last Wednesday on November 18th, Michigan Governor Whitmer also imposed a 3-week ban on indoor dining and in-person classes at high school and colleges. California Governor Newsom, meanwhile, has ordered a 10 p.m. curfew, putting the brakes on California's economic reboot process. Finally, let's take New York City as an example. New York City is a relatively active city for leftists in the United States. City Sheriff Joseph Faceto said on November 24 that people entering New York City from other states need to submit a quarantine declaration form and be quarantined for 14 days or provide a negative certificate of a recent virus test. Mandatory tracking stations for people in close contact with the virus will be set up at airports, Grand Central Station, Manhattan Penn Station, and the Port Authority bus stations in New York City. The sheriff's office will also enforce the law through phone calls, text messages, and even door-to-door or unannounced visits. Violators will be forced to quarantine, and repeat offenders will be fined at least $1,000. Currently, according to a tweet by New York City Councilman Mark Levin, on November 20th, New Yorkers are lining up and getting tested ahead of their holiday travels. This scenario is almost unprecedented in the United States. As we said at the beginning of our program, for Americans who are accustomed to a free environment, these measures are very unfamiliar, but perhaps this is just the beginning. And from some points of view, more serious regulations have yet to be implemented. On October 25th, 2020, former Vatican Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano shared an open letter to President Trump. He offered some insights into present circumstances in America. I highly recommend you read the first open letter. But today I want to discuss the Archbishop's second letter. In his second letter, Vigano told President Trump a global project called the Great Reset is underway, designed by a global elite who want to conquer all mankind by imposing coercive measures that radically restrict the freedom of individuals and the general population. The world leaders are the accomplices and enforcers of this hellish plan, and behind them is a group of immoral people pushing the process forward. The goal of the Great Reset is to establish a health dictatorship, stifle freedom on the grounds of pandemic preparedness, introduce health passports, digital ID cards, and establish contact tracing of the world's population, detain or place under house arrest those who resist, and even confiscate property to establish a global tyranny. But at the beginning of the program, they will use promises of guaranteed universal income or personal debt cancellation as a bait to attract people. In some countries, such programs have been approved and funded. In other countries, they are still in the early stages of development. This is part of Vigano's second open letter. In June of this year, Vigano, along with the first open letter, which contained related content, stated that the shadow government advocating for the New World Order is globally connected. They are a small group but monopolize governments, political parties, finance and economy, and the media. They occupy a hypocritical moral high ground, saying the nicest things but with evil intentions. They work with the bad people, with selfish people, or with people who are exploited out of fear. Together, they kidnap the good people of the world and look forward to the disintegration of the current social order and the establishment of their new order. On Twitter, President Trump shared the first open letter with the public, saying he hoped everyone would read it. Now, I understand this could easily be labeled as a conspiracy theory by the left-leaning media, but as I've been sorting through the news lately, I've seen more and more public reference to restructuring, which I find a little strange, and I thought I would share that with you all. Whether or not you believe it is completely up to you. In the spring of 2015, at the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction held in Japan, the United Nations reached a consensus with many countries around the world that one of the key elements is the Build Back Better program. Since then, this plan has become the mantra of many politicians, large companies, and environmental protection organizations. Why do these companies and leaders use this sentence as their standard? It has encouraged people to wonder if there's some kind of connection between all of it, and whether this is all just another name for the Great Reset. From British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in Europe to the Pakistani government in South Asia and star politicians in 2 North American countries, the Build Back Better program is constantly mentioned. In a speech given by Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, he states that, and I quote, "Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. Canada is here to listen and to help. This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change." End quote. Trudeau's speech has been making its rounds around the internet, and there are 2 key phrases in it. One is Build Back Better for the BB program, and the other is Reset. The current Democratic presidential candidate, Biden, is running on the campaign slogan, Build Back Better, and his current so-called transitional government website is buildbackbetter.gov. In his first open letter to President Trump in June, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano also mentioned that the shadow governments of the world would like to see a more transparent and accountable government in the future. Someone has been elected in the upcoming president election to express the goals of the shadow government. I wonder if that someone Vigano is referring to is Biden. A whistleblower from Germany says that the Great Reset project is in fact the 4th industrial revolution, in which a handful of billionaires will destroy the existing liberal democratic rule of law, decide the fate of humanity, and realize global socialism and establish modern slavery. The article also mentions that Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, published a book in July this year called COVID-19, The Great Reset. The World Economic Forum, which is held annually in Davos, Switzerland, is considered to be one of the few occasions where globalist tycoons discuss determining the fate of human beings. And on November 18th, the German parliament passed a swift amendment to the Infection Protection Act and decided by a majority vote that Germany was still in a state of emergency over the pandemic. More than 10,000 people rallied in protest, but were driven away by police with water cannon trucks. The reason for the massive protest against this bill is that it allows the German federal government, without parliamentary control, to massively restrict important basic rights for an indefinite period of time, such as bypassing the parliament and directly enacting law prohibiting people from going outside, communicating with the outside world, engaging in business activities, and holding religious gatherings, on the grounds of pandemic prevention. To put it more seriously, the German parliament would have no meaningful existence in the face of the pandemic, and the government would be in charge of everything. The amendment to the Infection Protection Act makes it look more like an authoritarian bill. And for what purpose did the German political class, led by Chancellor Angela Merkel, as well as German stars, consortia, and mainstream media, rush to congratulate Biden before the dust had even settled in the US election? From Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano's open letter, we know that Biden is probably the agent in the United States chosen by the world's shadow government, and that the current president, Trump, who has been hailed by American voters as the chosen one, is working against this very same evil. As long as the beacon of freedom remains lit in the US, there is hope for the world's freedom. If the US falls, which country can replace it? The evil powers of the world have also seen this situation. That's why there has been so much resistance against President Trump since he took office 4 years ago, including during this election. And what else is happening in Germany right now? The local media has begun to tout the CCP model. The German business newspaper Handelsblatt shamelessly published an article saying that Europeans and Americans have always felt superior for their own democratic systems, but fewer and fewer people believe that a democratic system can solve today's pressing issues. The pandemic prevention work has also failed, but the autocratic CCP has risen in the pandemic. The Beijing-based correspondence station of ZDF also released a short film praising the CCP for dealing with the pandemic more safely than other countries. The German media also noted that Biden plans to hold a summit of democratic countries during the first year of his tenure to develop a common agenda against internal corruption and external threats. These evil propaganda tools of the Western countries are fully cooperating with the Chinese Communist Party's lies in hiding their true intentions of promoting the Chinese Communist model. At present, the pandemic in mainland China is getting worse and worse, with crises popping up everywhere. But under the Chinese Communist Party's continued cover-up and violent suppression, it is very difficult for people to see the whole truth. Such a murderous system, however, has become a blueprint for the leftists and the devious forces in the world to realize their plan. The reasons why the US election is currently in the spotlight is because the significance of the election has gone beyond the concept of election results, which I think we can all understand now. At present, in the United States, President Trump's legal battle continues, but the resistance by the evil forces is still significant. A member of the ultra-left terrorist force, Antifa, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has been tweeting threats against Trump's supporters both before and after the election, and even directly threatened President Trump himself in a tweet on November 20th, saying, and I quote, "We are armed and ready to go. If you do not concede by Sunday at noon, we will begin to block roads in conservative areas," end quote. In fact, such events have already occurred this past Saturday in Washington, D.C., when a group of Antifa members marched through the streets of D.C., directly blocking the flow of traffic. The Republican officials who helped President Trump maintain the fairness of the election were repeatedly threatened by the left, even receiving death threats. In Wayne County, Michigan, where large-scale cheating occurred, the two Republicans who initially did not accept the election results were threatened and intimidated. In a recent incident, the entire family, including the pet of the head of the U.S. General Services Administration, Emily Murphy, was threatened. Nevertheless, the leftist media and many more individuals are turning a blind eye to the vile behavior. Pennsylvania Democratic Secretary of State Tom Wolf officially declared Biden won in Pennsylvania amid controversy on November 24th, taking the state's 20 electoral votes. In Georgia, although a second recount was open on the same day, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said the day before that he still would not match the signatures of voters on mail-in ballots, as requested by Trump's team, citing voter privacy. This continues to cast a shadow over the progress of the second recount. It has been reported that Smartmatic, the voting system software that has been heavily scrutinized for its involvement in election fraud, has recently been revealed to have a branch office in Taiwan. The branch office was established in 2010 as a research and development center in New Taipei City to consolidate its leading position in the industry. A company named Smartmatic Taiwan Corporation was also formed in the same location. There are reports indicating that on November 2nd, Smartmatic's high-level executives had traveled from the US to Taiwan for reasons that are currently unknown. After this news was made public on November 22nd, it was widely rumored in Taiwan that US CIA Director Haspel had quietly arrived in Taiwan, which was denied by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Taiwan. However, that evening, a US Navy plane landed at the Shenzhen airport and was confirmed by Reuters to be the US Indo-Pacific Command's Director of Intelligence, two-star Rear Admiral Studman. The naval plane he was aboard kept a low profile and did not turn on its identification signals until he had almost reached Taiwan. It's still unsure whether this naval intelligence officer's appearance is related to Smartmatic's research and development center in Taiwan. The Apple Daily quoted from an anonymous source as saying that the purpose of his trip was to provide an intelligence asset for the purpose of subordinating and consolidating intelligence in the Asia-Pacific region and conducting project reports. The Apple Daily News report also mentioned that he was going to give a briefing to Biden's national security team. Either way, Smartmatic has become the eye of the storm in this election fraud case. According to Bannon, a former White House strategist, one of the reasons Attorney Powell was recently declared a solo is that she is investigating the deepest, most systematic issues, which will be enough to expose all the dirty laundry. The Trump legal team, led by Giuliani, is targeting 5 or 6 states in the U.S. in a targeted legal action. In an interview on November 24th, Giuliani also revealed that Powell and President Trump's team were acting separately because they were pursuing 2 different points of view, but did not disclose details. On November 23rd, President Trump's team made important legal progress in 2 key states. One was in Michigan, where the state legislature is led by Republican lawmakers who all agreed to hold public hearings to investigate election irregularities. At the same time, on Monday, the Michigan Supreme Court ordered lower courts to take swift action to evaluate allegations of election fraud in the United States. In addition, as we reported yesterday, a federal appeals court in Pennsylvania has also begun to speed up a trial in President Trump's election misconduct lawsuit. President Trump also made a brief appearance on the afternoon of November 24th, announcing that the U.S. Dow Jones Index had surpassed 30,000 for the first time in its history, but left after only a minute in what is seemingly the shortest presidential White House press conference in history. The U.S. stock index made history in spite of the pandemic's impact and the social unrest caused by the leftists, which is indeed a cause for celebration for the Trump administration. In the current situation, it is also a boost to the morale of the Trump camp. Well, that's it for today, my friends. Make sure to like and share, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.